So with this design log, my goal is to build a compact, lightweight T-mount 3-inch quad. I've been sitting on a lot of the parts for this build for about 10 months, so the tech in this first segment is going to be a little out of date with what I'm working on now, but the later revisions, I've got some more interesting ideas that I'm playing with now, and this sets the groundwork for it, so we can just burn straight through it. Now, a lot of my reasoning behind this design is I'm looking to build more smaller quads, so I don't have to buy 6 motors for every single build like I do with the Hexes, and I'd been really enjoying flying my Atom, and was starting to wear that frame out, so I'm largely looking for something to fill that kind of role. My target all-up weight is about 120 grams, although we don't actually get anywhere close to that in this first revision, but again, this sets up the groundwork for cleaning it up later. I also really wanted a platform to test the 1304 motors, which I had just recently discovered at the time. It also gives another excuse to do some material testing. I've been using the 6061 on my Hex frames for a while, and I really consistently been able to bend the arms on them, so my target design weight on this is less than half the weight of the Hex. So I can use the similar design parameters that I used on the Hexes with the same material, the same thickness, now with less weight, and I can get a better sense of how close to the structural limit I am of the aluminum. So the basic layout is a very slight H-frame. It's a symmetrical motor layout, so no dead cat nonsense to deal with, and we've got a little extra gap in the front just to help make room for the electronics in the middle and try and get the props kind of out of the way of the camera just a little bit. The design of the arm is basically the same as what I had been using on the Hexes, so I've got the cutouts down the middle, the same bolt hole pattern. I've got little arms, little nubs on the corners for screw mounts. I had originally been wanting to experiment with some prop guards for indoor flying, and so these give me a light place to mount the prop guard, so I don't have to have a big loop of plastic that covers all the way into the middle of the body. I can just have a shorter run that clips on at the arms themselves, so I can save some material and weight on that. Although what I did find eventually is that the weight of the quad and how fast that these kind of heavier 3-inch ones get going, that the prop guards, even in nylon and making them thicker, until they get kind of in an unwieldy thickness, they just break too easy, and so I eventually end up abandoning that idea. Same antenna tail down at the back that worked so well on the Hexes, and the normal cutouts here for the zip tie VTX mounting, nice flat metal section there for heat sinking, and some fun little kind of triangle cutouts there in the middle, just because I don't really need all this material there for the flight controller, which can be taped up in the front, and to give a bit of a space for a Velcro strap to go around the bottom. On the underside, the cutouts are the same as on the Hex for weight savings on the arms, leaving a nice thick outer rim so that we don't fold the edge of the motor mount over and crashes. And then I leave just a thin section there for taping and heat sinking on the VTX and the flight controller, and then a bit of an X in the middle to try and get some additional stiffness in there without giving up too much material. And like we definitely don't need all of the strength of a full 3mm crossbar, but just to give us a fighting chance, I don't want the body to be folding over. We should still see the arms hopefully first, if there are any problems in crashing dealing with the material. And that's really all there is to it. And the current state of the buildup, I've got some of my extra bits on here as it came together. It's a little on the heavy side, what with the covers, and been crashing a lot harder, and those blue ammo-way antennas, I've just been absolutely destroying them. So since I happen to actually run out, I've got a big foxier thing on here. I've got some AX2s coming, and those are destined for this thing, and I think that those will be the perfect antenna for it. So the rest of the build, fairly straightforward. If you've seen any of my others, the normal ESC arrangement, because this frame is so much smaller than the Hex, I'm not using frame grounding anywhere. These are just point-to-point grounded, keeps it really nice and simple. They just run down the sides and then meet up in the back. There's no PDB, it's all just wiring harness. This also still has all the development stuff on it, so I've got a lot of extra wiring. I've got my there's the SD card feeding off the flight controller from down there, and you can see that's this board here. So we've got the flight logger still on there, and all this extra stuff. No HD camera, of course. This with this one, the little camera protectory things work perfectly fine. The cover is TPU, mainly just to keep things clean. It's pretty ugly. I'm not super happy with the shape. I really kind of miss the streamlined kind of teardrop stuff from my other builds, but as you can see, there's just like absolutely no clearance at all, so I don't really have much room to go and make it bigger. This is just riding on top of the flight controller. It's only about like 1 millimeter kind of difference in there, so it's just form-fitting and functional, and that unfortunately is what it has to be at this point. The ESCs, I'm using Cicada 10 amp ESCs, and it's a little marginal for this setup with 3S and the 5000 kV 1304 motors. These can pull a good bit of power, even on 3S. So, but haven't had any problems with it, and they've been pulling just fine. Definitely can flatten the batteries. I'm flying the same kind of packs that I do on my Atom with the 1105s, and I can drop it down to 3.3 volts after only about 30 seconds if I'm really trying. So but they've been managing okay. They're not really any smaller. They're about the same size as the KISS 18 V1s. So I was kind of disappointed in that, but they still fit, and they fit in the arms and fit in the build just perfectly fine. Importantly, great for, of course, this one you can see, all of these corners are trashed. I've had plenty of garage flying with this, so it's been up against concrete. And this is only the 3mm. This is not the 4mm frame. Has not bent one bit. So I've trashed, like I say, I've been destroying antennas quite a bit more, and you can see all of the rashing on the edge. This thing is still perfectly flat and level. You set it down, it hasn't bent or tweaked or anything. So it's a bit porky for a 120 build. My Atom build is about 130 grams all up. And this is a good bit more. This is more like 180. So with all the extra plastics, and especially this big heavy thing here on the end, it's put on a lot of extra weight. But despite that, with the extra weight, this is still strong enough to hold up to that impact. So I'm definitely going to switch this one up for the next version to 7075 and trim it down, and let's see if we can cut some more weight off this frame, and if I can get my total build with all my extras closer to the trim weight of my Carbon Atom build. The little guard, I haven't test flown a lot, but I've just gotten TPU for the cover, and this is a nylon front plate. I really like this in the garage, bouncing off cones and gates and all of that. It just saves the props quite a bit, and you can bounce off something and keep flying, and that I like, so I will take the weight penalty for it. Big problem with this is the weight balance. It's an H frame. But the center is centered between the arms, and it's just not quite enough. This actually balances right now. This balances pretty close in the middle, but I've got this huge weight on the front, probably 7, 8, 10 grams or so of nylon hanging off really far at the front, and the massive Fox ear antenna in the back. But without this frame guard in place, and with the battery, which because of the camera bumper has to sit slightly back of center. I'm getting a center of balance that's just about here instead of being right in the middle. So I'm just a couple millimeters back. So what I really need to do is take this and bias it back, or bias it forward just a couple millimeters, so that I can keep the weight balance quite centered, because you can see it in the black box logs. The motors are definitely, I'm losing, especially in yaw, I'm losing quite a bit of yaw authority, as the motors can't spin up evenly, or can't evenly spin up to full what I'm trying to get the thing. So the flight controller and the VTX on the top. I've got the camera mount with my 3, and this of course is super sturdy and holds on really well. The same setup on the other, with the zip ties holding the receiver in place, or the video transmitter in place, super sturdy. This is just, it's VHB down. I've got just one little thing here because I've been flying it without a cover, just to help keep it from popping off in crashes if I hit stuff hard. You can see the ESC wires feeding down the side, and then on the other side, on my uplink airport, this is where my SD logger, SD card feeds in. This is a little bigger pigtail than normal, and once the build is fully tuned and stuff, then that comes off. The receiver wires go down on tuck down in there through the triangle to the underside, where we have again my voltage telemetry board. In this one I have a little wire adapter, so I can get rid of the pins, and makes this just a little easier to work around where it needs to be, with a much smaller battery backing plate than on the hexes. And in this case I'm strapping the strap around the battery thing, and this just helps keep it, because this one isn't clicked in quite as much, and makes it a little nicer to switch the batteries out when this doesn't come apart quite so easily. So the whole thing, especially once I have the SD card thing off it, the whole thing, when it's undone and disassembled, stays super tight and really well packaged in. Definitely something I'm going to have to look into in the next one is the cutout for the strap is a little small. I'll have to go over all of the different straps. This is just a Glacier rubberized one, and it's a little thick to get through, and so it's kind of hard to get. You want it to be a little tight so it doesn't slide all over the place, but it's a little difficult to work in and out. So I may need to make these just a little bit bigger to work with a wider variety of straps, and just to make maintenance a little easier. My little battery backing plate is even thinner and lighter this time. All of these little pegs and stuff work really well around. The front round pegs sit just inside there, so it keys in so it doesn't slide just on its own. The receiver there tucked in, and all 4 of the ESC leads. Had to deal with this less, as pass-through, BLHeli pass-through is working on my targets now, so that's been nice, but I still like having that option, and they tuck really nicely just flush with the top of the Pica Blade daughter board on the receiver, so that still fits really nicely in the build. The video feeds in to my normal video setup, and I have the camera pad the same as in my hex builds, but it's on a smaller PCB. You're not going to be able to see it here, but it's tucked underneath the receiver and coiled around before it feeds up to get to the inside of that. So this is a little bit of a rat's nest in here. I didn't want to cut my antennas either, so I've got the extra stuff coiled around, but it's just enough, and it all fits in, even with the my telemetry wiring going out the side and the video tucking under. It's just enough space that with the cover in place, it kind of tidies it up. And that's not something that you have to get into very often. So if it's a bit of a tight fit, that's, you know, perfectly fine with me. So